Kicks it back out. Ori drives all the way in.
In this video series, we're constructing the best, modern, 12-man roster of NBA players who never made an All-Star game. If you haven't watched them yet, check out parts 1 and 2, where we cover the guiding principles behind this exercise and select our starters and 5 bench players who will run the full court press. In this video, we'll pick our last 2 bench spots, the head coach, briefly touch on honorable mentions, and speculate on their championship odds in the modern NBA. Let's hop right into it with our 11th man. If you've been following the series, you probably can't believe it's taken this long to select 7-time NBA champion Robert Horry. Coming out of Alabama, Horry was drafted 11th by the Houston Rockets and won a pair of titles with Hakeem Olajuwon. He won 3 more with the Chicago Lakers and 2 more with Tim Duncan's Spurs. Big Shot Rob's 4th all-time for most postseason games played. While known as one of the most clutch shooters in NBA history, Horry was a better regular season player than you might recall, though never close to all-star level. Bill Simmons ranked him 84th all-time in his pyramid. Writing about his game, he's a terrific help defender who constantly covers for his teammates. He's big enough to handle power forwards and quick enough to handle small forwards. He picks his spots and only asserts himself in big situations when his team truly needs him. He doesn't care about stats or touches at all, which gives him something in common with maybe 2% of the league. And he gets better when it matters. What more would you want from a supporting player? Here's a list of his most notable clutch playoff performances and end-of-game shots. You might expect this kind of list from one of the GOATs of the sport, but nope. It's from a role player who, in the highest stakes imaginable, consistently raised his game. The advanced metrics bear this out too. His regular season crafted plus minus is a very solid 1.9, but his postseason crafted plus minus jumps to 3.1. That's an incredible leap when you realize that under the highest pressure and against the league's best competition, he was about 60% better in the playoffs. Robert Horry easily deserves a spot on the roster and is a shoo-in for our squad's Crunchtime 5. But first, we need to fill our very last roster spot. Our 12th man goes to the late, great Hall of Famer, Drazen Petrovic. Hailing from Yugoslavia, present-day Croatia, Petro had great success in the EuroLeague and international competitions, and was drafted 60th by the Portland Trail Blazers in 1986. He was part of the very first wave of European players in the NBA. When he finally arrived stateside for the 1990 season, Drazen's play style didn't fit the Blazers' scheme, plus they were already deep at his position. Due to a lack of playing time, the following season he requested a trade to the New Jersey Nets, where his NBA career would begin to flourish. In the 1993 season, he scored 22 points per game and earned a third-team All-NBA selection. Petro was a knockdown shooter from everywhere in the court, who could also put the ball on the floor and create. He was described as fearless and a hard-training gym rat. Plus, he could talk trash in 4 languages. If he hadn't passed away in a car accident after his 93 season, Petro likely would have ascended to All-Star status as he was entering his age 29 season. Don't just take it from me, here's what a few NBA legends have to say about Drazen.
All time? All time? International player of all time?
Yeah.
Dirk. Petrovic.
Petrovic. Oh.
What do you like about that?
Yeah.
He was about Petrovic? Yeah. He really had the ability to shoot the ball, and he was very athletic. Very athletic in his ability to shoot the ball. He wasn't afraid. He wasn't afraid of nothing. Like, you know, he wasn't afraid of the moment. He wasn't afraid of anything.
I consider myself, you know, I'm being a little braggadocious here, but I consider myself the best shooter ever. But there's one guy that tops me, and it was the late, great Drazen Petrovic.
Yeah.
This guy, when he came off screens and he started to talk to you, you couldn't understand him. He smelled like he never took a shower. Maybe it was something complimentary.
No.
Talk about wanting to strangle someone.
Yeah.
Drazen Petrovic was my nemesis. I could not stand this guy, but to this day, I respect him because I think he is the best shooter I've ever seen in my life.
Better than Ray Allen.
The best shooter I've ever seen in my life.
Like a bunch of guys on our roster, Petro played in an era that didn't fully appreciate his skills. He ranks 5th in all-time three-point percentage. If he played today, he would have taken far more than 2 3-pointers per game. Even more impressively, if we look at 3 field goal plus, which compares a player's three-point percentage versus the league average when he played, Drazen is first all-time at 132. Petro was a below-average defender, but played decent team defense. Our squad has a ton of defense already, but nobody with his ability to be a microwave scorer. He'd come off the bench, extend the floor, and score in bunches, creating his own shot with the rock in his hands. An embarrassment of riches having Drazen Petrovic as any team's 12th man.
Petro for three, got it!
Now we're on to who will coach this team. For fans of this channel, it'll be no surprise that Phil Jackson, the Zen Master, is my favorite basketball coach ever. He never made an all-star team as a player either, which kind of fits our theme here. And even though he coached 5/12ths of the squad, I feel he's handcuffed to the triangle offense. There's Greg Popovich, who is one of the greatest coaches in NBA history. He was ahead of the rest of the league on several innovations, such as load management, but not sure he fits the underappreciated essence of this non-all-star squad. Jerry Sloan's closer to the mold, never winning an NBA title nor Coach of the Year over 30 seasons as a head coach. Plus, he was tough as nails as a player, earning 6 defensive team selections, so he could likely teach our bench the full court press. Though he was an all-star twice, a bit of a knock against our theme. Most damning, he didn't seem comfortable making big adjustments during playoff series. So we're going with a former player, a non-all-star himself, who is actually one of the toughest omissions from our 12-man roster. We're selecting none other than 9-time NBA champion, Steve Kerr. In my opinion, Steve is currently the best coach in the NBA, and second place is not even close. Kerr is the perfect blend of Jackson and Popovich, borrowing elements from Phil's triangle offense and Pop's spacing and pacing. Add a dash of up-tempo principles from D'Antoni, and
Baby, you got a stew going.
Kerr is the first person in NBA history to be a part of 70-win teams as a player and head coach. He still doesn't get enough credit for the transformation of Mark Jackson's 51-win team one season later into a 67-win juggernaut, winning 3 titles in 4 years. His teams are often the league's best offensively and defensively, and he can teach every guy how to shoot better. It's no coincidence the greatest shooter ever and his all-time Splash brother are both under his tutelage. Not to mention he's always seemed like a good guy and class act, well on his way to a Hall of Fame induction, where I'm sure he'll make one hell of a speech.
A lot of people have been asking me about the shot the other night.
Michael in traffic to Curl.
And there have been some misconceptions about what actually happened. I wanted to clear it up. When we called timeout with 25 seconds to go, we went into the huddle.
He comes off, I'll be ready.
Phil told Michael, he said, Michael, I want you to take the last shot. And Michael said, you know, Phil, I don't feel real comfortable in these situations. So maybe we ought to go in another direction. Why don't we go to Steve? So I thought to myself, well, I guess I got to bail Michael out again.
Here's Jordan. Did not have the shot.
The shot went in, and that's my story, and I'm sticking to it.
Now we'll quickly share a few honorable mentions. This is the entire list, roughly ranked by toughest omissions. There are many great role players on the list. At the top, I'll call out Cedric Maxwell, 2-time NBA champ and Finals MVP in 1981, 4th all-time in true shooting. Great small forward, hate to keep him off, but his strength, the low post game, is extinct from today's strategy, replaced by ball movement. Michael Cooper's our 80s hustle guy. 3-time NBA champ Danny Green's a tough scratch as a solid 3-and-D guy. That role's already deep on this team, but I could be talked into him over Bruce Bowen. 3-time all-defense stud Paul Pressey, perhaps the first point forward ever. A real Swiss Army knife, he could handle the rock and guard positions 1 through 4. The aforementioned Steve Kerr, who holds the highest 3-point field goal percentage, 45% in NBA history. 2-time all-defensive guard Derek Harper, one of the highest rated non-all-stars by advanced metrics. A well-rounded, consistent two-way player who would fit on any team. 2009 sixth man guard Jason Terry. Solid offensive game and consistently rose his level of play in the postseason. A huge part of the 2011 Mavs title team. 3-time sixth man of the year and one of the league's most beloved teammates, Jamal Crawford. The advanced analytics don't love him, but he'd be terrific coming off the bench as a microwave scorer. 13th in assists all time and Kyrie Irving's godfather, point guard Rod Strickland. Hot Rod had a strong offensive game as a gifted passer, otherworldly ball handler, and fantastic rim finisher. But he was a locker room troublemaker and overall malcontent. Did I mention he's Kyrie Irving's godfather? 1982 assist champion point guard Johnny Moore. He was a good starter for the San Antonio Spurs, but is on this list because of his massive leaps in the playoffs.
Super Johnny Moore. He's super.
His regular season box plus minus was 2.2. In the playoffs, that rose to 5.0.
Oh, he's great. He's fantastic. He steals the ball, and his shots are much better than ever.
His best playoff stat line was 1983, when he averaged 23, 15, and 4 with 2.5 steals per game. Bonkers.
Words can't describe him. He's fantastic.
Olympic gold medalist and first in win shares among all non-All-Stars, Sam Perkins. He was a part of many NBA playoff runs, but never secured a ring. A solid, consistent contributor who played until he was 39. Now, let's talk about our entire 12-man squad. Some strengths and weaknesses. First, obviously, we have a ton of defense. This is partly because All-Star selections favor offensive stats, so the available pool of players skews away from scoring. And it's partly due to the desire to play as many guys as possible in big games, to make full use of a deep bench. In turn, we are weak offensively, particularly with ball handling / shot creation. We have 2 point forwards in Kukoc and Odom who are interchangeable and afford easy lineup adjustments. Nate McMillan and young Ron Harper are decent playmaking point guards. Drazen Petrovic and, to a lesser degree, Brent Barry can handle the rock too. But a bunch of guys in this roster are incapable of creating shots. In hindsight, I think sacrificing Bruce Bowen for Johnny Moore or Derek Harper could make for a stronger squad. But as constructed, one of my favorite facts about this team is that every player is 6'5" or taller. It's a massive squad, and height is an advantage that we don't really make athletic sacrifices for, except with Sabonis. It's also a relatively high-character team, perhaps with the exception of Bowen. Everyone gave a crap. There's no head cases or locker room distractions in the bunch. It's mostly team-first guys who knew their respective roles and sacrificed personal stats for championships. The epitome of the secret. And they are not short of accolades. They garnered 24 total all-defensive selections and a whopping 29 NBA championships, not including Coach Kerr's 9 titles. So what would their title chances be in the modern NBA? As we covered at the very beginning of the series, for most regular season games, playing time will be spread out. Skill levels are fairly even across the board, so our bench guys will likely start a lot of games and vice versa. Starters will sit a lot. Full court pressing will be rare. Flexibility is key, and on any given night, a couple players might get hot, so of course they'll play more. This will likely be a high-seeded team going into the playoffs, particularly when you consider most teams practice load management, and starters' minutes per game are the lowest they've ever been in NBA history. So our team won't have to face the top 2 or 3 stars on a competitor for that many minutes. Expect a top seed in either conference. Going into the playoffs, if minutes are spread around evenly, each guy will only have about 20 minutes per game on their tires. Compare that to top starters in the low 30 minutes per game range, and we'll have fresher legs. Against the best NBA teams, the top 2 or 3 guys on the court will likely be playing for the competition. Our bottom end starters will probably pull even with theirs, so we have to hope our 6 through 12 can make up the difference at the top end talent. Come playoff time, I'd envision the rotations looking like this. Likely throw in 2 to 4 spurts of the full court press throughout the game. Of course, it's dependent on matchups. Everyone gets some action in the first half to determine what's working, who's having an on or off night. Adjustments are made at halftime, and then ride the guys playing best. Unless they're having totally off nights, the Crunchtime 5 needs to include Robert Horry for his clutch shot making, and Shane Battier for his high leverage IQ. Unless Petro's super hot, Brent Barry is our 3-point assassin and part-time creator. The last 2 spots are up for grabs. There are lots of possible combinations, though we definitely need ball handlers. With 5 rings, Ron Harper can be trusted at point guard in big moments. And for our last big, Lamar Odom answers the call nicely. I particularly prefer his defensive versatility over Kukoc or Sabonis. So Harper, Odom, and Barry split ball handling duties. We have a couple solid 3-point shooters and top-tier defense. Hell of a Crunchtime 5. But would our insanely deep team be able to take down a top title contender playing their superstars 40+ minutes? Aside from the KD Warriors, I think they'd beat anyone in a 7-game series. Envision the spiritual successors to the 2004 Detroit Pistons. We'd have one of the best defenses ever, tons of lineup flexibility, and the smartest, most team-oriented guys imaginable. Cap it with Kerr as coach, and they'd be title favorites every single year. Thank you so much for watching this very long series. Please like and subscribe, and comment below with your 12-man non-All-Star roster.